To continue our discussion about kidney and urinary physiology, we need to look into the formation of urine. Basically, how does the kidneys work and how do they do this? One interesting idea, though, is as the kidneys are filtering the plasma, they're filtering it roughly 60 times each day. So your entire body's blood plasma gets cleaned and filtered about 60 times every single day. Just goes to show how much filtration is occurring, how often your entire blood flow is going through the kidneys. So what really is the filtrate? It's the blood plasma minus the proteins. So think about what's in the plasma, so that's not the cells. What's in the plasma and take out the plasma proteins. Everything else gets filtered. The urine, by the time it's formed, less than 1% of that entire filtrate process. Because if you think about it, 60 times a day, and let's say you have 5 liters of blood. So 5 liters of plasma there. So 5 times 60, you end up with 300, give or take, liters. Now, that's a lot. You're not basically voiding 300 liters a day. That's why it's less than 1% of that filtrate actually is voided out of the body. The vast majority, the vast majority, is all reclaimed. So how this process works is really 3 main different processes all working together. So urine formation is, first off, glomerular filtration. That's when you have the capillary, which is the glomerulus, filtering the plasma out into the nephron. Step 2 is then tubular reabsorption. That's when things are leaving the nephron and heading back into the capillaries. And step 3 is tubular secretion. That's just kind of like a balancing act. Maybe there were some things that didn't quite get filtered out of the blood like they should have, or too much got reabsorbed. You're just kind of pushing a few things back in the urine just to get rid of them because they shouldn't be there. But all 3 of these processes together that helps control the formation of urine, making sure you're keeping everything in a homeostatic balance in your body and only getting rid of what you need to get rid of, whether it's metabolic waste, whether it's excess ions, or whatever it is. This mechanism here is how it's all controlled. So first off, looking at the glomerular filtration. That's that first step. Now, glomerular filtration is controlled by 3 primary forces. And these are all passive. They're all set up already. First off, you're going to have this blood hydrostatic pressure. Now, the blood hydrostatic pressure, you can see, is going from the capillary into the glomerulus. So into that glomerular capsule. So that means this is how much force is leaving the blood. But then you have 2 forces that are going in the opposite direction. You're going to have this blood colloid osmotic pressure. That one's showing about 30 millimeters of mercury now. The blood colloid osmotic pressure is done with a water balancing. Because you have all this water leaving the blood, but you're leaving the protein behind, water wants to go back and try to balance it out. So there's some force going backwards there. Second one is the capsular hydrostatic pressure. As that filtrate goes into the glomerular capsule, it stretches a little bit. Well, its elasticity wants to close back down. So it's trying to push the fluid back into it as it's going into there. But if you look at it all together, you're looking at the 55 millimeters of mercury pressure leaving, 30 going back, and 15 going back. So that 30 and 15 is 45. So 55 out, 45 back. We have a net filtration pressure of 10 millimeters of mercury going into the proximal convoluted tubule. Because that overall glomerular filtration pressure, that was the largest. And even though there's 2 other ones counteracting, they don't add up to the same amount. They don't have the same pressure. And that's one of the most important reasons why we need to maintain a set pressure in the glomerulus. If that pressure drops, those 2 pressures that are going in reverse, the colloid osmotic pressure and the capsular hydrostatic pressure. Can be equal to or greater than, they'll push the fluid back in and there's no filtration occurring. So we have to maintain that blood hydrostatic pressure. Otherwise, we can have a whole process here completely stopping. So we're looking at our glomerular filtration rate, GFR. Now, glomerular filtration rate is how much filtrate is formed per minute. I put up here 120 to 125 milliliters per minute. Well, that's a pretty substantial amount moving through per minute. 60 minutes an hour, hours an hour, that adds up very quickly. So you're looking at your glomerular filtration rates. It's governed by total surface area. Makes sense. The more surface area, the more filtration can occur. It's governed by net membrane permeability. Sure, how large are the fenestration slits? How much fenestrations are in the capillaries? How much negative anions are being blocking and being pushed away? As well as the net filtration pressure, NFP. Now we need to get more into that net filtration pressure yet, but these are the three different forces that govern the glomerular filtration rates. So let's look at the glomerular filtration rates and intrinsic and extrinsic controls. Now, both of these can play a part. Quite often, though, you get one or the other, they're not counteracting each other. The intrinsic controls are renal autoregulation. Pretty much means the kidneys are controlling themselves. They don't need outside control, they don't need the nervous system, just they are going to do what they're doing because they know how to do it. The extrinsic controls, that's when your nervous system and other things can override. And that usually doesn't happen unless there's stresses in the body and things occurring, which we'll get to what those are. So your intrinsic controls, these are the ones inside the kidneys. First off, myogenic controls. Myogenic, think muscle. All right, increase in blood pressure. If there's an increase in blood pressure, the afferent arterioles are going to constrict. I'm saying, hold on, constrict increases pressure. Yes, but by being smaller, less blood can even go in the first place. So by constricting, you have less blood in, a little bit higher pressure, but when it opens up into the larger glomerulus, the pressure drops. So an increase in blood pressure, the kidneys automatically vasoconstrict the afferent arteriole. That allows the protection of the glomerulus. So you're not going to have too much pressure. You're not going to over pressurize it. And that keeps and maintains the glomerular filtration rate, keeps it at a steady state. Now a drop in blood pressure. Well, now we don't have enough pressure coming through. What ends up happening? You dilate the afferent arterioles. Open them up. So that will cause a drop in pressure. In the afferent arteriole, yes. But by opening the afferent arteriole, you increase the blood flowing through, but the glomerulus is the same size. So that means you have a lower pressure, but more blood going in that can't all get through at the same time. So it helps to increase the pressure that way. It's all about trying to maintain a homeostatic level for your glomerular filtration rate. It's not about what the pressure is inside the afferent arteriole. It's what's the pressure in the glomerulus. So the afferent arteriole, that's just meant to vasoconstrict, vasodilate. Do you want more blood or less blood getting to that glomerulus to alter that pressure, or maintain that pressure, I should say? Because everything here is about maintaining glomerular filtration rate. All right, another intrinsic one, the tubuloglomerular feedback. Now in this case, we're looking at the macula densa cells and the JGA again. We've already talked about that in a previous video. But if you have an increase of salt, so that means we've now increased the salt levels inside the filtrate, so inside those tubules, then you can have those macula densa cells picking up and saying, hey, there's a problem here. We can cause vasoconstricting chemical going onto the afferent arteriole. Vasoconstrict brings it down, therefore less blood going in. Less blood goes in, you decrease your glomerular filtration rates. Less glomerular filtration rate means less salt going into that system. So it's all about controlling the blood flow, controlling the ions coming in to maintain certain levels. Now, if sodium chloride decreases, salt decreases, then the exact opposite occurs. Basically, reverse everything that we just said above that. All right, that was intrinsic. This now is switching over to extrinsic controls. In the case of extrinsic controls, under normal conditions, pretty much autoregulation prevails. What that basically means is if your body's not stressed, if there's nothing weird going on, your kidneys will autoregulate. They're not going to change. That's under normal conditions at rest. The blood vessels are dilated and then the kidneys control themselves. But this extrinsic control under extreme stress. Now, extreme isn't like once in a lifetime. This can just simply be you're putting your body under stress. What ends up happening is norepinephrine and epinephrine are both released. Now that's the fight or flight response. That norepinephrine and epinephrine are both being released, causing constriction of the afferent arterioles. Well, if you do that, you release more renin now. So it's all about creating this whole cascade, this whole process that's occurring. Because you're trying to deal with how the body's going to react to this stressful event. And how can the kidneys help? You're saying, well, how can the kidneys help a stressful event in a fight or flight response? What does renin do again? Renin goes to the angiotensin cascade. Angiotensin, too, can increase vasoconstriction, can increase salt retention, increase blood pressure, all things necessary for the entire body to respond. So again, that triggering. Granular cells are releasing renin, so JJ cells, renin, juxtaglomerular apparatus. Once you do that, it combines and causes angiotensinogen, which came from the liver. We talked about this before in a previous video, so just let's refresh it. Angiotensinogen then is converted to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 can be converted through the ACE enzyme in the pulmonary system to angiotensin 2. Now, angiotensin 2 can now have several different effects. It can cause several different things to occur in the body. So in looking at the effects, we first off have the constriction of arteriolar smooth muscle. If you constrict arteriolar smooth muscle, you're increasing your MAP, your mean arterial pressure. Also then, stimulate the reabsorption of sodium. More sodium in, more water in. Blood pressure goes up. And stimulating the hypothalamus, which deals with ADH. More water consumption, or water conservation, I should say, not consumption per se, but you might be drinking it. More water being saved in the body, pressure goes up again. If you're constricting the efferent arterioles, decreasing peritubular capillary hydrostatic pressure, all this stuff is effects of angiotensin 2. It's all about more fluid coming in, more fluid into the systems, less fluid being excreted. Pressures go up. Meningeal cells contract. You're decreasing surface area. Less surface area means less filtration. Less filtration means the filtrate stays in the blood. If it stays in the blood, you maintain more blood pressure. Again, keeping that blood pressure, keeping the blood flowing. This one has a ton of information, so full screen. What you're seeing here is if your systemic blood pressure drops, there are many different avenues that your body can work through to help get that pressure back up. Over here, we're starting with drop in blood pressure in the afferent arterioles and a drop in glomerular filtration rates. Therefore, you're vasodilating the afferent arterioles, more blood goes in, you increase the glomerular filtration rate. That's that myogenic mechanism. If you go into the tubuloglomerular mechanism, you've dropped the glomerular filtration rate. Well, in this case, you now have a decreased filtrate flow, a decrease in sodium chloride, which means the macula densa cells, the juxtaglomerular apparatus, are all working out here. That's vasodilation of the afferent arterioles increasing glomerular filtration rates. The key is to increase again. Then the third one over here is the hormonal mechanism, which is the renal angiotensin cascade. In this case, glomerular cells of the juxtaglomerular apparatus again, the kidneys work, you're releasing renin. We've gone through this before, the whole renin cascade deals with the adrenal cortex, the afferent arterioles. You're increasing vasoconstriction, you're increasing aldosterone secretion, you're increasing sodium reabsorption, which increases blood volume and increases blood pressure. And last but not least is the neural control over here. Baroreceptors in the blood vessels, looking at now a stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. In that case, systemic arterioles are going to vasoconstrict. Vasoconstriction increases blood pressure again, which means we have a whole ton of different things all working here. From the myogenic muscles to the actual kidneys themselves and their receptors to the nervous system, as well as the hormonal mechanisms. There's everything being involved in blood pressure regulation. So we know we talked about blood pressure back in the cardiovascular with the blood vessels, but the kidneys, they play a huge role in it as well, because the kidneys are dealing with volume, dealing with water, dealing with blood volume, dealing with how everything is flowing throughout your body. So a little about how more of the physiology of the kidneys, as well as the different mechanisms that go into at least the start of urine formation.